This is Gemara Nazir Daf Yud Ches. Apologies for the slight lateness of today's shiur, but we're holding on the bottom of Yud Zayin Amid Beis, and we're in the middle of discussion of the Shaila of Rav Ashi. That's why we're looking at the top of Yud Zayin Amid Beis, 4 lines down. Ba'i Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi had a Shaila that if someone makes himself a Nazir while he is in a Beis HaKvaros, while he is in a cemetery, does he need to be Megaleach or not? That's the fundamental Shaila of Rav Ashi that we dealt with half of the previous year, answering, and we're going to pick it up from there today as well. And what were the two sides of the question? Do we say that you only have to shave your head if you are tar, become a Nazir, and then you become Tameh? Why? Because you became Tameh to your Nazirah, so the din when a Nazir becomes Tameh is he has the din of Tiglachas. That's one way of learning. But someone who is Tameh, he's in the Beis HaKvaros and makes a Nazir, he doesn't need Tiglachas, or there is no difference. So the bottom of Yitzayin Amid Beis, we tried to bring a raya, but the Gemara answered 2 lines in the Brada, Ma'ilav Tiglachas Toma. Seemingly, we had a raya that the Bryce was referring to. There's a din of tiglachas, even when the person is tameh, even though, like this case of a Nazir bebeis hakvaros. And to that we answered, Loi tiglachas tahira. The Bryce was referring to only when there's a din of tiglachas if a tahira becomes tameh. And now from there we pick up in which the Gemara says, Hachinami mistavra. This is indeed logical as we turn over to Yud Ches Amud Aleph. Says the Gemara, this is indeed logical. Why? If you're gonna tell me, one second. Oh, excuse me. Toma Yemechalutai. Apologies, we're having issues today. Here we go. It has to be that the Bryce was referring to tiglachas of a tahira, the regular case of tiglachas. Why? Says the Gemara, because if it was talking about tiglachas of one who was tameh, meaning he was a Nazir, made himself a Nazir while he's in the cemetery, when he is a mitzayra muchlat, when they decide he is a Mitzayra, of course he also needs Tiglachas. And therefore, says the Gemara, that we do have in some scenario that a Mitzayra Muchlat is similar to a Nazir. Again, I don't know if we explained this detail in the previous year. The comparison is that a Mitzayra, someone who has Saras, he goes to the Kayin, he goes to quarantine, and then the Kayin says, yes, that is indeed Saras. He's confirmed Mitzayra, he has to leave the camp, he has to become Tameh. When he finishes his din of Tzaras, when it heals, there's also a din of Tiglachas, of shaving. So there's this unique similarity between a Mitzayra and to a Nazir. So then the question is, the Brisa that we're in the middle of discussing, that was quoted in the bottom of Yizayim Beis, said that there's a difference between a Mitzayra Muchlat and the Nazir who became Tameh. And the reason is, the Mitzayra Muchlat is shaving his head while he is Tameh, and the Nazir is only because he was Tar and then became Tameh. So then there's a difference. But these Al-Gadaitach Tiglachas Toma, there was also a din of Tiglachas by a Mitzayra, or by a Nazir, when he's in a Beis HaKvaros, when he was Tameh, Michaluta and Miloi by Tiglachas, and it's the same din. Says the Gemara, there's no raya. Tiglachas, din Nazirus Katani, he didn't specify which level of Tiglachas, it just said by a Nazir. Baruch atah Adonai. So the Brisa, we try to bring a raya. We answer that there is no raya, but our Hachinam Bistavra fell on deaf ears as well. So Tashema, the second line of Yud Ches Amud Aleph, let's try to bring another raya. Again, we're trying to bring a raya to the Shaila of Rav Ashi. If someone steps upon his ears while he's in a Beis HaKvaros, does he have a din of Tiglachas or not? Says the Gemara 3 lines down, Yud Ches Amud Aleph, quoting the pasuk in the Torah, V'tamei roish nizroi. And he comes tamei, the roish, the head of his nizroi. Explains the Raisa. B'tar shenitma kasem medaber. The regular case of a tar, a nazir, that becomes tamei, that's when there's a din of tiglachas. This pasuk is not talking about tiglachas, it's talking about shutan havarasar, number one. Ve'havas sipurim, siparin, to take off his hair, and to bring the karbanos of the siparin of the birds, and as well. V'liftar as a nazir bekever. And what else does the pasuk teach us? That it's only a tar that becomes tamei. But if he was tamei all along, if he was in a beis hakvaros, then he is pater. That what? She'eito in avar asar. He doesn't have to remove his hair. Ve'avasi pairin, and he does not need to bring the birds. And now the Gebraisa explains that we have a pasuk. We're learning from this pasuk v'tamei roish nizroi, that only if one becomes tamei, he was tar, becomes tamei, that's when the dinim of this pasuk of avar asar and bringing the birds applies. But if he was tamei all along, why was he tamei all along? Because he accepted the naziris b'beis hakvaros, then he would not have such a din. The Brisa continues and says v'aloi dvarim kal v'chaimer. Why do you need a pasuk? In reality, we can learn this from a kal v'chaimer. Umatar shenitma, in the case of a tar, becomes tamei. What's the halacha? Tanavar asar v'avasi pairin. Misha yatame mischila. So was originally tamei. Einoi din sheyeta nava asar v'avasi pairin. You would have thought, logic would dictate, if someone who's tar becomes tamei as this din, certainly if you're always tamei the whole time, you should have the same din. And that is the reason, says the Raisa Talmud Loimar. 10 lines down, the first one line is Talmud Loimar. V'tamei roish nizroi. The pasuk is honing in to teach us what? Specifically this halacha. B'misha yatar v'nitma. Only if he was tar and he becomes tamei, akasa medaber she'itan avar asar v'avasi pairin. V'liftar as a nazir bekever. Whereas if he becomes a nazir while he's in the kever, he was in a tar that became tamei. He was in the beis hakvaros the whole time and he accepted upon himself naziros. There would be no din avar asar in bringing the birds. Shema mina. So this Brisa is a conclusive, beautiful proof to the Shaila of Rav Ashi. Is there a din of tiglachas? And the answer is no. There's no din of tiglachas if someone accepts upon himself naziros while he's in a beis hakvaros. Says the Gemara, beautiful. Now let's delve a dot deeper into the Brisa we just quoted. Man tana ha de tana rabban. Who is the tana of the following Brisa? This Brisa is a Brisa we quoted yesterday, and really we started off today discussing. Says the Brisa, Ein bein tamei shenazir lenazir tar shenitma. There's no difference. The case that we're talking about, a regular nazir that was tar and becomes tamei, is no different than one who was tamei. He's in the cemetery, he's in the beis hakvaros, and he accepts upon himself naziros ella. What is the only difference? When one is tamei, now we're going to explain a bit deeper, perhaps the details that we ran through yesterday. Someone who is tamei and he becomes a nazir, he's in the beis hakvaros. The halacha is he does not have to bring a carbon because he wasn't a tar that became tamei. So he doesn't have a special din of carbon. If he doesn't have a special din of carbon, he doesn't have to wait to day number 8. That's when you would bring the carbon. Therefore, the 7th day of his tahira, he has to wait 7 days to become tar. On day number 7, that counts as the first day of Nazirus. He's in the cemetery. He's tamei. He accepts upon himself Nazirus. He leaves the cemetery. He counts 7 days to become tar. On day number 7, when he becomes tar, boom, that is day number 1 of his Nazirus. Whereas, the Nazir tar shenitma, if I have a Nazir tar that becomes tamei, why not? Because he has to bring the karbanos on the next day, on day number 8, and therefore day number 7 does not count for part of his Nazirus. So who is the Tana of this Brisa? Amar Rav Chisda, Rabbi he. This is the Shita of Rabbi, the Amar Rabbi. Ein Naziras Tahira Chala Ella Ad Shmini. The Naziris of a Tahira, meaning a regular Nazir who was Tahar, then subsequently becomes Tameh. So now he has to wait to 7 days, bring the special Karbanis, etc. Says Rebbe, when does he start counting? Day number 8. Just like the Brisa said that day number 7 does not count, but rather he has to wait to day number 8. Because if you're going to tell me it's the opinion that argues on Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Nazir Tetayra, Mishvi Yehuda Chayla. He says it counts at day number 7. And the Brisa we just quoted said explicitly, when does the Naziras of a Tahira begin? Day number 8. So says the Gemara, this is clearly going with the sheet of Rebbe, and not Rav Yosi, but Rav Yehuda. Says the Gemara, let's delve a bit deeper. My Rebbe, or my Rav Yosi, Rav Yehuda, who are these shitos? Titania, we learned in a Brisa. We're at 20 lines to the end of Yud Chesam and Aleph. The first word on line is Titania. We learned in a Brisa, V'kidesh, as Roshai B'yoyim Ha'o, and he sanctifies, he makes holy his head on that day. B'yoyim Ha'vois Karbanos of Divrei Rebbe. Says Rebbe, on what day do we sanctify him? On what day does his Naziros Chal? On what day is the first day of his Naziros? On the day he brings the carbon, which is when? Day number 8. Rav Yisrael, Rav Yehuda, Omer, no. B'yoyim Tiglachtoi, on the day that he shaves. When does he shave his head? On day number 7. So we're saying our Brisa is like Rabbi, not like Rav Yosi, Rav Yehuda. Asks the Gemara, V'haditanan, that which we learned in a different Mishnah, Nazir shenitma, Tomais harbei. If we have a Nazir that became Tamei many times, Ein mevi ella, Karban echad. We have to see exactly how this works. But we have a Nazir that becomes Tamei multiple times. What does he bring? 1 carbon. Says the Gemara, Man Tana. Who is this Tana that says that the Nazir that becomes Tamei multiple times only has to bring 1 carbon? Amar Rav Chisda. This Tana could even be Rav Yisrael, Rav Yehudi. Amar Nazir Ta'ira Mishvi Chaylof. It works on day number 7. So since the Naziros, according to Rav Yisrael, Rav Yehuda, is Chal on day number 7, says the Gemara, so therefore Mishkachas Lagun Shenitva Bishvi V'chazer V'nitva Bishi comes Tamei day number 7, comes Tamei day number 7 again. Day number 7 is before you bring the Karbanos, and day number 8, therefore according to Rav Yisrael, Rav Yehuda, you're only going to have 1 carbon for multiple times that the Nazir becomes Tamei. Says the Gemara, why? Kivan. We can read the bracket to Mani Rav Yisrael, Rav Yehudi. Kivan de layata shah riura elahavi carbon. Since there was never one moment that he could actually bring a carbon, there was never on day 8. This all happened on day number 7. Einoi chayiv ella carbon echad. So this Brisa is going with this Mishnah, Rav Yisrael, Rav Yehuda. Now the Gemara explains Ditei Rebbe, because if you're going to say this Brisa goes with Rebbe, 1 second. I de nitva b'shvi v'chazav nitva b'shvi. Kolu tomarech lehi. There's no chiddush according to Rabbi. Because according to Rabbi, when does the new Nazirah start? On day number 8. So of course, if you become Tamei in day number 7, it's all one long Tumah. Of course, there's 1 carbon. Vi denitma b'shmini. But wait. Maybe we'll say, you know what the Mishnah means? The Mishnah means there's a Nazir that becomes Tamei many times and brings 1 carbon. How? He becomes Tamei day number 8. V'chazav nitza b'shmini. Hare, but can't be according to Rebbe. 4 lines to the bottom. Yotza shararu lavi carbon. There's a moment that he can bring a carbon. And therefore, once that moment hits, if he becomes Tamei, it's a separate Toma, and he needs a separate carbon for that. Says the Gemara, my time with the Rebbe, where does Rebbe know this from? Amar Krav Chibar Allah Ma'asher Chata Ala Nefesh. He needs atonement for that which he sinned on the Nefesh. V'hader, and then it says V'kidesh Es Roishai. Then you sanctify the head, and therefore that's where Rebbe learns that all has to do with the carbon on day number 8. Rabbi Yehuda, in Kein Leimar Krav V'kidesh Es Roishai. By Yom Ahu. As we turn over to Yerches Amid Beis Vayom Ahu, Lamali says, Rav Yehuda, what are the extra words of Vayom Ahu coming to teach me? Says the Gemara, Me'ena inyan lishmini, Tineu inyan lishvi'i. And what does Rabbi do with the phrase of Vayom Ahu? Rabbi Nami Yakseh Vayom Ahu, Amr L'cha Rabbi Ahu La'achi Uda'asa, Loimer L'cha. That phrase of Vayom Ahu says Rabbi teaches you Avlish Le'avi Karbanaisav, even though you did not bring the Karbanais. Still, day number 8 is when the count begins anew. Day number 8 is why the new Naziris is. Even though you didn't actually, in practicality, bring the karbanos yet, but day number 8 is when everything is dependent upon. So that's the machlekes of Rabbi and Rav Yisrael Yehuda. That's the sources of each. And we're explaining how this brisa is only going to work according to the opinion of Rav Yisrael Yehuda and not Rabbi. Says the Gemara, what did we just quote in the top of this Amud? We just quoted that there is that within the machlekes Rabbi and Rav Yisrael Yehuda is the machlekes. What do they do with the word Bayom Ahu? According to Rabbi, Bayom Ahu refers to the calendar day, day number 8, whereas according to Rav Yisrael Yehuda, it does not. Now, when does day number 8 begin? We know in the Jewish calendar, the days always begin at night. So day number 8 in reality begins at night number 7. So based on that detail, Rav Chisda asks the Gemara, 1 second. My doch, look, Rav Yehuda. We just finished saying that this whole Mishnah on Amud Aleph has to be Rav Yehuda, and that's the only time they can have multiple tumas with one carbon. Because according to Rabbi, it would have to be day number 8, and then there'd be multiple carbon. No, he says, wait. Look, Mal, we can say the case of that Mishnah is Ke goin de nitma techazia belel shmini. He became tameh at a moment he was fit on the night of the 8th. Rabbi, and then it can fit even according to Rabbi, because that is when day number 8 begins at night. Says the Gemara, 1 second. The fact that we didn't say this, Lema kasavar. Should we suggest that maybe the reason Rav Chisda didn't say a word to the Rabbi, and he said it only according to the Yisrael Yehuda, you know why? Because maybe maybe because Rav Chisda holds that the night is not considered lacking in time, that even though, when do you bring the carbon? By day, and the night before is when the day begins, but maybe Rav Chisda is of the opinion that it's considered as if you could bring the carbon at night. Meaning, of course, you're not allowed to bring carbonas at night. And of course, in practicality, you can only bring the carbon day 8. But maybe because day 8 begins at night, in a halacha, Rav Chisda views it ki'ilu at some level like the obligation for the carbon began at night. And that's the reason why he couldn't say it's according to Rabbi. Because then again, there's a moment of time theoretically to bring the carbon, and then you would have separate carbonis for each toma. Says the Gemara, this is not accurate. Amar Rav Ada Bar Ava, you know why? Ha baha talya. They go hand in hand. If you're going to tell me that the nighttime is lacking in Zman, then the carbon, l'safra, then it can't be brought at night. So when does it brought? In the morning. And then Nazir's Namila Chayla Safra, the Nazir's as well starts in the morning. If you're going to tell me that no, theoretically, you could bring the carbon at night, Nazir's Taira, Chayla Mi'urta, then that's when the Nazir's actually will be Chal as well. And therefore the Brisa, whichever way you slice it, cannot fit according to Rabbi, and that is why Rav Yisrael Yehuda, that is why the Rav Chisda learned the Mishnah on the bottom of Amud Aleph, like Rav Yisrael Yehuda. So continues the Gemara, Gufa, let's delve a bit deeper into this discussion about regarding the Tumah on day 7, day 8, meaning again, we know when one becomes Tumah, he has to wait for a 7-day purification process. And now the question is, in day number 8, he brings the carbon. When do we begin counting the Nazirus? Do we begin counting on day number 7 because he finished his count? Or no, does he have to wait to day number 8 when he brings the carbon? So says the Gemara Gufa, we're about 20 lines at the bottom of Yechashim base at the 2 dots. Nitva b'shvi, if someone becomes Tameh on the 7th day, v'chazar v'nitva b'shvi, and it happens again. What did the Mishnah say in the bottom of Amud Aleph? The Mishnah we just spent time discussing is like Rav Yisrael Yehuda, according to Rav Chisda, Einai mevi ala carbon echad. Whereas Nitma b'shmini, if it comes Tameh day number 8, he has to bring a carbon for each and every one. Maschel umayne miyad. So what does it mean? He becomes tamei number 8. He brings the carbon for each and every one. He begins to count miyad, because it's day number 8. And therefore he begins the Nazir's count right now on the 8th day. Divrei Rabbi Eliezer. V'chachamim oimrin, no. Carbon echad al hakol. Says the Chachamim, even in this case, is only one carbon. Ad sheyavi chatasai. Says the Chachamim, I don't care that day number 8 is fit to bring a carbon. Did you bring the carbon? No. So you're still in the middle of your Naziros. Says the Chacham, if you become tamei again, that same carbon will suffice for both. Whereas hevi chatasai, once you bring the carbon v'nitma, then hevi chatasai v'nitma, then maybe carbon akol echad ve'echad. So the Chachamim do not prescribe that it goes by when you're able to bring the carbon. It goes in practicality when you actually bring the carbon. What if you brought one of the two carbonos? You only brought the chatas and not the asham. Maina, he begins to count the Nazirus. Rabbi Shmuel ben Aish, Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika, Aimer Kishem shechatasai ikvasai. Says Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika, says Rabbi Shmuel ben Aish, that just like before you bring the chatas, you can't start the count. Kena shavai makvasai. So too does the carbon asham hold him back as well, and he cannot start counting the Nazirus until he brings both the chatas and the asham. So says the Gemara, Bishlam, I understand the Rav Eliezer. Where it's the source, Rav Eliezer Markra, he makes his head sanctified on that day. Afal Bishlevi Karbanaisav, even though you didn't bring the Karbanais, I can understand the first opinion, Rav Eliezer. Why? This is like Rebbe by Yoimahu. On that day, day number 8 is when it all goes down. So I understand the opinion of Rav Eliezer, how he fits it into the pasuk. V'Rabbanan, now according to the Rabbanan, 7 lines to the bottom. Hahu, what does that teach us? Avol b'shlevi hashamai. No, b'yomahu, on that day. What does that mean? You brought the chatas, you didn't bring the asham. That's what b'yomahu comes to teach us. Elo Rabbi Yishmael, Ahu lamali. According to Rabbi Yishmael, you have to bring the chatas, you got to bring the ash, and only then do you start counting the Naziros. What does b'yomahu teach you? Amr Lacha answers Rabbi Yishmael, Ahu afal pish lahevi oilasai. You know what it comes to teach me? Comes to teach you, even though you didn't bring the carbon, oilah. The Rabbanan, according to the Rabbanan, oilah loibai miuta. According to the Rabbanan, we don't need a special pasuk to exclude the one who did not bring the carbon oilah. Why? Daroin ba'almahu. What is the carbon oilah? Carbon oilah is a gift, simply, and therefore it's not really giving you the tshuva, and therefore, according to the Rabbanan, it's obvious that the carbon oilah does not hold anything back. So says the Gemara, "My taimayu derabanan." So what is the reason, according to the Rabbanan? What do they do with bayoimahu? So we said a moment ago, they learned that even if you didn't bring the carbon asham, you brought the oilah, but you didn't bring the asham. Says the Gemara, why do we need a pasuk to teach us that? Titania, as we learned in a brayse of Israel, Hashem esimei nizroi. Vehevi keves ben shenasai le'asham. Says the pasuk, he dedicates to Hashem the Nazirus. And what does he bring? He brings a keves, he brings a sheep, and shenasai of 1 year as an asham. Mata amaleimar, what is the pasuk teaching us? Lefi shematzinu shekol hashamai sheba Torah shehein ma'akvin. Since we see that all carbon ashams are ma'akev, that you don't receive your tshuva until you bring your carbon asham. Without them, you don't have the appropriate kapara. Yachal, so based on that detail, that usually an asham is critical, last on Yechesem Beis, Yachal avzem akvasai. So I would have thought as well that over here by the Nazir, the asham is critical as well. Talmud Loimar, when this we conclude as we turn over to Yutasim and Aleph, Talmud Loimar, Vehezir. Says the Pasik, Vehezir, Vehevi. That what happens? He's Hazir, he dedicates it as a carbon, as part of the Nazirus, and then he brings the carbon. Afal Pishla Hevi, Hazir. From here we learn, even though he did not bring the Asham, still he can start count as Nazirus. So even though normally the Asham is critical to the Tshuva process, over here the Chachamim hold a special din, it is not. Rabbi Shmuel ben Yochanan ben Broika Omer, Ve'ezer ve'hevi. He learns out from the pasuk, "Ein masay hezer bisman shehevi." Don't learn out even if you didn't bring, but no, it's only when you bring it. If according to the Arsh Asham is critical as well. Just the Oila is not. We'll pick it up from over here in the next year. Amir Tzah Hashem.